it's the end of something big, right? But of course, the end is a long process, and it can be a decade-long process. So I think that basically, with the long-term debt cycle, every several decades, when you reach a massive amount of debt, when you go down to zero interest rates, and you have kind of just massive amounts of debt in the system, usually you go through some sort of currency devaluation and system change, right? So it's not the end of the world, but it's the end of an era, basically. And I think that's something we're seeing in a number of markets. But to get less doomy than that, if we focus more on the near term, we're in a cyclical downturn, and not all cyclical downturns become recessions, but some subset of them do. And so when we look back over the past, let's say pre-COVID, we had like a 10-year long, economic expansion in the United States. We still had 3 cycles within that decade-long period of accelerating growth and then decelerating growth. And it just that the decelerating growth never became negative growth. It never became an outright recession, even though you had a couple near misses there. And so what we've been in over the past more than a year now is a decelerating growth environment. And then combined with the fact that this one is so inflationary, kind of leading up to that, that this one is becoming more severe and is kind of starting to look like a recession, at least by many indicators. So it does not look like a recession in terms of employment yet, but by most other, especially leading indicators, it does look more recessionary. And tying this into crypto, to the extent that I'm here, historically, when you look at the Bitcoin and crypto bull markets, a lot of people tie it to the Bitcoin halving, which I think is relevant to some extent, but it also actually matches up very, very closely with these economic accelerating and decelerating environments. And so, for example, we can use the Purchasing Managers Index. It's kind of a go-to macro indicator for economic acceleration or decelerating. It looks like a sine wave over time, and they average roughly 3-year cycles. And it just so happens that all the Bitcoin bull runs were during these rising PMI environments, and all of the downward or choppy sideways periods were in declining PMI environments. And of course, that all of crypto kind of goes up and down together, maybe with a little bit of a lag. And a lot of what dictates the PMI environments is also liquidity conditions. And so central banks and kind of dollar liquidity around the world, generally, one of the big questions was, for example, why is Bitcoin not serving as an inflation hedge? And of course, that would extend to any sort of finite token. Why are these things going down when you ironically have high inflation in fiat currencies? And there's actually really good charts out there that show, Bitcoin in particular. I use that one because that's what most of the macro people will look at, because that's the biggest, most liquid one. And you'll see that, in rising global M2, so rising global money supply year over year, Bitcoin does very well in that environment. And now we're actually in a period where money supply is growing more slowly than it was a year or two ago, and you have multiple central banks, mainly the Fed, kind of pushing back and strengthening the dollar compared to many other currencies. And so when you translate all that back into USD denominated global M2 growth, it actually kind of came to a standstill. So ironically, now that price inflation is happening with a lag from monetary inflation, and some central banks are actually fighting back, it makes more sense as why we're seeing kind of downward price action in a number of assets, including Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Yeah, so global debt cycles are kind of correlated to that global reserve status, but not necessarily the same thing. And so in the last kind of long-term debt cycle, we did see the transition from UK having global reserve currency to the United States. One point I've been making for a while is that, now there's really no country large enough to have the only global reserve currency. That was kind of actually an anomaly that persists in history. It's not something that necessarily has to repeat over and over again. And that I think we're heading towards a more decentralized type of system. And I think that was somewhat accelerated by the events we've seen in Ukraine, right? So you have Russia initiate a war, and then the West responds by cutting off their foreign exchange reserves. And then you kind of, everyone kind of realizes around the world at the same time that, wait a second, the money-like aspects of these reserves are maybe not as money-like as people thought, right? If they can be censored, if they can be confiscated, whether or not you agree with the reason, that now gives an incentive to a number of countries to be like, wait a minute, I mean, we're holding liabilities of countries that we're not necessarily fans of. What does that mean? What should we hold instead?
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
I have bad news for you. If you're not rich by now, you're screwed. And if you're in debt, you're even double screwed. How so, you might wonder? Well, the sad truth is that you're working your whole life to make someone else rich. The mega corporations, the banks, the politicians, everyone is getting richer. They get your money. And what is even worse, they get your time, they get your life. You are not even in a rat race, you're in a financial prison. But what could a solution for you look like? Honestly, I don't know, but I know what a solution for me would look like. It's very simple. I use whatever money I have and I multiply it with 1,000. This could make my life much easier and probably yours as well. If you have $1,000 available and multiply this with 1,000, I believe that this could solve some financial issue for the one or the other. Of course, if you're ugly, you would have to multiply it with much more than 1,000. My name is Markus Dahn, and this is what I decided to do. I decided to 1000x my money. This is not a joke. I know what you may be thinking. What is this guy talking about? How should this work? This is not possible. Well, I made a detailed video where I laid out my plan. And some clever folks might even want to look at this plan and copy it and do exactly what I do. This is just a little hint on the side. You have two options. You leave, you forget what you have seen. You do whatever you're doing and you hope that somehow you get some other results. Good luck with that. Or you click the link below the video. You enter your email address because I'm not showing this to everybody. You at least watch my video on how I plan to 1000x my money. The choice is yours. Make the right choice. Join me. See what a different future you could have. See at least how I intend, how I plan to do the 1000x. So click on the link below, enter your email address, and I see you on the other side. Your Markus Dahn.